Let me remind everyone, old and new, that everything that I produce, everything that I have performed, everything that I have read on these tapes, such as the Kyroots and or any other series of writings, are all for the purpose of trying to convey some new information. They are not simply to create laughter, which is all right, but that is not the sole purpose. It is not to simply be entertaining. This is not as sticky as it may sound. I shouldn't warn you. But since last week last time we were taping, I started out with an attempted mundane intro, and it very quickly got so sticky, if you recall, that most of you felt as though you were not only in unexplored territories of the bush, but maybe in a whole new state, and not necessarily a profitable one. So, that being the case, we have reversed it. Am I correct? So this week I would like to assure you, no problem. It's just brand new stuff, but no problem. Are you ready? It's an area that's never been covered in human consciousness before, but it's things with which all of you should be able to extract some fleeting passing amount based on your own experience. End of intro. Ordinary consciousness believes that there are two great pools that feed the stream of progress, discovery, intellectual growth. And the two pools are knowledge and not knowledge, and knowledge and ignorance. And they believe that the former is fed, absolutely, is fed from the latter, that in some way knowledge is derived from, is extracted from, the second great pool of ignorance. That would appear without any doubt that, such as, to take good hard examples, scientific progress comes about through the areas that have been identified by any interested party, that they're areas of which we are ignorant. And it changes from time to time. But in Sir Fig Newton's time, there were certain areas about the heavens and the movements of bodies, both celestial and here, of which the folks were ignorant. And so then apparently you have people here and there that take the pool of ignorance, things that are not known, through luck, sweat, perspiration, inspiration, from this pool of ignorance, they slowly extract knowledge. And so we've got it at all given times, whether we're talking about scientific or the great spiritual questions that stir men's souls and plague their minds at midnight. You've got this one pool of knowledge, things known, and this other great pool of things not known. But there is a constant, assuming there is progress and change of some kind, it is a constant process of extracting from the latter pool, the pool of ignorance, fuel that turns slowly, if not instantly, into knowledge. Now 3D consciousness sees those two pools as being the only sources that fuel streams, if not rivers, of change and discovery, intellectual growth. But there's an unseen pool. There is an E-pool. And it is from this E-pool that all real new data is derived. You cannot have anything that is new information that does not come either in part or in toto. I could say one or the other, but I'm trying to keep it simple. And so you got your choice, whichever seems the most plausible to you at the time, right now. But all of the new info either comes in part or in toto from the E-pool. Now, among other descriptions I have given relating to whatever E is, in this case we can make it stand for unexperienced. It is not a process going on of things unknown coming from this pool of ignorance. It is coming from a pool wherein things are yet to be experienced. Keeping up my solemn pledge to make this simple. Let me first remind you, all of you should know by now from your own experience, that the ordinary functions of the yellow circuitry can only think of things old or things that are old based. That's it. Then you've got the question, those of you that have some glimpse of this, I'll try to make it a little clearer for those of you that have glimpsed it and now you forgot that you glimpsed it and now it's confusing. First, let me ask you, how is anything brand new, how is anything new ever thought for the first time? It's not simply just thought, or it's not new. Now let me give you, trying to drag it down to everyday levels, an example. What if you were out doing your morning jog? And by now all of you should have some passing awareness of how the mind works under these very mechanical conditions. These kind of just hot-wired, non-attentive, short-lived daydreams going on as the red circuits are enjoying themselves. I know some of you may internally smirk, but enjoy themselves. That they seem to be in charge. Let's say that you're jogging down a new street and you turn around and there's this huge building, this warehouse, and there's a little sign there on the lawn that says Tompkins Video Exchange and Rewiring Services. And you immediately have some sort of picture. You can just glance at some of the big bay doors are open. You can see lots of trucks backed up, lots of cars over here, so people are working there. And you have some flashing glimpse of a picture of people. I can make up several examples, several possibilities of people, perhaps with this long assembly line, and they're packing things in boxes fixing to go out the door. You're not sure what, but it's obvious electronic crap. You don't have to know much about it. Maybe it looks like big old TV picture tubes with just boxes of all kinds of wires coming out. Or perhaps there's some kind of flashing something of a whole lot of people over some little tables, and they all have these soldering irons and all kinds of weird electronic stuff, and they're doing things. And just like that, you just glance at it and you keep running, and then you look off. But apparently you have had a daydream, a thought about what might be going on in there. But the name doesn't tell you anything. You do not know. And you don't pay any attention to it ordinarily. But in a sense, you have thought up a new thought for you. That is, you do not know from the name of this company, from the description. You do not know what is going on in that building. And yet your yellow circuits flashed a picture that only takes perhaps that long, and you look on to something else. You do not stop and go, my God, that's curious. What in the world could that be? At one blush you would say, or you could say, if you were trying to follow the way I started this, that you had had a new thought, but you have not. Whatever you thought, take my examples, or if any came to you while I was trying to describe that, they were based upon things you have already seen, and the more sophisticated be the environment, that is, our part of life's city, our part of life's being, as opposed to someone living in the limited environment, we might say, of Australian Aborigines. That much, you never think about, but much of what passes for new thought, that is, of you having a satisfying thought about what's going on in Tompkins' warehouse without knowing, it is not based upon necessarily that you have personally ever stood in any warehouse and seen an assembly line going on. Movies, TV, you've been there. You have a picture of something that you have never experienced. You have a satisfying picture of something that you have never seen exist. Unless you're going to say a movie's real. The experience of you seeing that which seems to be the base of this thought, the basis of this thought, you have actually never experienced. But that was not a new thought. Because even have you not actually experienced that, you have thought it before. You thought it before, if nothing else, when you saw a movie. How many times have you seen a movie that's somewhere, or a TV show that's somewhere, a few seconds, a few minutes of action did not take place as some people are going through, walking through, standing in front of warehouse activity. You never think about it, but now, as far as you're concerned, you have experienced warehouse activity. And it's quite possible that there's some of you who have never been in a warehouse. It is possible there's some of you who have never been around any activity that would qualify as being electronically based. But you never think about it as far as you're concerned. You might immediately, if asked, agree that you're not an expert and you would not really know exactly what people are doing, but you have a picture. You can think of a picture of people doing electronical work without any doubt, because you have seen it in the movies, TV, or you've read about it, or you've seen still pictures in an article in a magazine. It is a reality to you. You have experienced it, and yet from one viewpoint you had a new picture. You had new thoughts as you were jogging by, glimpsed the name of Tompkins Warehouse, an electronic warehouse and repairing, and you had a satisfying picture just for it. Took long enough of your picture of one or more possibilities that could be going on in there. The unanalyzed satisfaction or satisfactory nature of the daydreams was that something along those lines has to be going on in there. As I said, you do not stop and ponder it, or you do not stop or as you're running see a sign that you do not immediately identify and think, oh my God, they're in there cutting open little children and old women. They're in there plotting to put a bomb in my locker at school. As far as you're concerned, it is something that fits into the ordinary scheme of things. So from one quick view, you could say that you have had a new thought. You do not know for a fact what's going on in there, and yet something in your circuitry conjured up a satisfactory explanation that's probably somewhere close. But yet, from another view, you have thought of nothing new. It's just apparent that you had never thought of that exact thing before. But you didn't think of anything new. It was all old thoughts. It was all based on old information. It was all a matter of saying, all right, I can think of that which is brand new. I can think of something that nobody's ever thought about, a flying pig. All you can do is take the old information and apparently have your circuitry put it together in a way that is new to you. But it is not new. Surely you can see that. Now my question, one of the questions, where does any new thought come from? Somebody has got to think it. How did something happen in a movie that's never happened? Now back at the city level, a writer somewhere had to think of something that apparently was new. It would have apparently had to be new enough that it would survive or escape any possible copyright challenge. That it had to apparently be new with him. It had to apparently be an original book, screenplay. But if there were actual new thoughts out in the world, now remember where I started, 3D consciousness believes this is true, that it comes from a great pool of ignorance and then something new comes as progress, that this is a new idea, a new thought. if there was such a thing, there has to be somebody somewhere who thought of it first. But if it was truly a new thought, they had to think of it without the benefit and without the limitations of everything that they had thought about before. They could not think of flying pigs. They could not think of people in there in Tompkins' warehouse working on an assembly line or huddled over electronic equipment. That is not new. To even think of that which seems to be relatively new, such as my example of you jogging by and having a satisfactory picture to you of what's going on in the warehouse, wherein you've never been in the warehouse, you do not know what the description on the sign means, you have never even personally seen the insides of a warehouse. But for you to apparently have thought of something that was relatively new, you had to have the already sufficiently old info stored. But part of what I wanted you to get in passing was a fact that no one analyzes, that nowadays it is sufficient to have stored information that is old and reliable, that was not based upon your personal multi-sensual experience. They can be done from two-dimensional pages out of a magazine, out of a book. It can be done out of movies, out of television, and it now functionally is as though it was information gained through personal experience. I'm not attacking movies and TV, that's not the point. But no one analyzes what a degree, what a percentage of what you accept as being your experience that can immediately conjure up satisfactory, operational pictures of what's going on. If that was too strange, how about you're down driving in Miami Beach and you look over at these huge 80-foot motor yachts, and you have never been on one in your life. But I dare say all of you now, you'd be driving along talking to somebody and you just turn around and glance. Maybe somebody says, "Isn't that a beauty?" And you glance and there's this fast of a picture, if not you, other people with that motor yacht out 4 or 5 miles, and just a split picture of people, maybe a beautiful girl back there sunbathing and a couple of guys staying up there leaning over the rail and drinks in their hands. That as far as you're concerned, you have an experience-based picture that that's not something strange, that you have been there. You don't think about it that way, but you have been there enough that you know what goes on in a yacht. You can see it. But you see it from having watched Miami Vice. You see it on the basis of watching TV for the last 30 years, movies for the last 40 years. This is not an attack on any of the media or the entertainment industries. But there is a purpose for me bringing this up, that people do not distinguish in any way what seems to be personal knowledge of something that they gained either through their own experience, that is, of physically being there, or of having witnessed it secondhand through print, through moving pictures, etc. We are back, or I am, just for a second, to the place I continue to put my foot down and to say that all of you are going to go through some initial moments that I normally describe as becoming aware of the fact that you can't think of anything new because of the fact that you can't think of anything new. Or that you have never thought of anything new simply for the fact that you could not think of anything new. That whatever the materials you have to think with, you've already thought of everything that you could think of. And the ideas, in fact, that some people have that they mightn't get involved with some revolutionary, some would-be revolutionist out in the bushes that would make them think of such weird things that they might go crazy or do something terrible. People that believe that, there is no danger of them getting involved. That is not the problem. See, in the city, everybody plays by the rules. They just believe otherwise. But you get a flash that you have been forced to play by the rules, and one of the initial flashes, frights, joys, is realizing that one of the specific areas of rules from which no one can escape is, I can only think that which I've thought before. I can only think that which I have words for. I only have words for those things that I have already thought. If there is anything going on anywhere else, if there is some kind of other dimension going on, if there's an invisible world going on, if there's some bushes in the outskirts of the city, I'll never know it because I can't say it. I can't think it. If I can't say it, I can't think it. If I can't think it, I can't say it. If I can't think it, if somebody else says it, I can't hear it. It's something to look forward to. Well, it's like finally having an unbelievably surly animal of some kind just bite the piss out of you in places that you did not know that you could be bit. Now, a little back on the path that I was doing, you could say that a real revolutionist would be someone who could think that which has never been thought, would be someone who could see that which has never been experienced. You could say that a real revolutionist would be someone who could understand things that no single individual has ever experienced. I could bring it right now to what I could make sound as though it's sort of an intermediate stage and say laterally, the beginning of that is not being limited to the pools of either apparently what is known and what is unknown. Not even limited to two pools that could be described as that which has been experienced and that which is yet to be experienced, which is just synonyms for the first two great pools. But a kind of at least lateral stretch toward a revolutionary position would be that you can begin to understand that which no single individual has ever experienced. You'd be talking about, on a lateral level, a multitude of individuals' experience put together. In the city, all sight is cyclopic. You've got the one big eye. And that one big eye sees that everything is either known or it's not known. And all ordinary eyes are only affixed on those two pools. But then the cyclopic sight only looks to one pool as being the fountainhead of new information. In the city, they would say, well, only a fool would expect new information. And then cyclopic sight, as I was starting out initially suggesting, the majority of the people would assume that new knowledge is going to come from the pool of not knowledge. When I look over in what's known to find something new, we've already established that. So this great one big eye always affixes itself on one location, that this is where new knowledge will arise. It has to be. All revolutionary sight would turn to the E-pool and would in turn all irrelevant, all unexperienced, all of that which is unexperienced, it would turn into new data. It would turn it into new data even before it was personally experienced, which of course belies all notions of cause and effect, the linear running of time that they hold back in the city. And of course, if all that be true, then all of this is untrue. And I have no idea whatsoever how I have tricked so many sophisticated, charming, delightful, and may I say, good-looking men and women for this length of time. Several times back I already threw out what could be another motto, that if you hung around even the outskirts of the city long enough and you suspected there were some revolutionists out in the bush, if not some deranged spirits, somewhere you would finally hear someone say, if it ain't irrelevant, it's of no interest and no value to me. Now, it's only in the city that everything is orderly and sane. You've got to get out in the bush for things to be chaotic, deranged, but it would only be there that you can learn how to derive new information, first off, from what seems to be your own experience thus far, and then to gain real revolutionary data, which is not limited to that which you apparently have experienced. If that's what you're left with, how are you ever going to get ahead, much the fuck less catch up? As fast as you can, you try and derive some map. If people did such things back in the city, that is, explanations, analyzations of your experience thus far. Be like an expanded attempt to keep a living diary. That you have got to bring your map up, your analysis of what happened to you today, right? And here it is, 9 o'clock at night, and you're up to when you got from work today. Assuming you're up that close. From your laughter, I will also assume that most of you get a glimpse of the fact that it'd take you the rest of your life minus 1 hour to get up this far. But assuming that you're already up to that far, and you're wrapping up what happened at 5 o'clock, and then you're like, well, all right, then what happened on the way home? And then you get to the point, I sit down after I had a drink and something to eat, and I started the daily analyzation, and now I'm up to where I was starting to analyze me sitting down here, and now I'm only a few inches, a few heartbeats, a few moments away from what I just wrote here, and I've got to analyze that. You will never catch up. Forget getting ahead. Forget it. And if you're not going to get ahead, what's the purpose in any of this? If you're not going to get ahead, you're limited to the same information, the same consciousness that everybody's got. Everybody. If that's all you've got, that's all you've got. And you may think that you picked up some new terms or strange plays on words here from me, but you can never make your own experience. Just speaking in a lateral, personal sense right now, you could not turn your own experience into any kind of meaningful map. It's always too late. It's out of date. It's absolutely impertinent to analyze what you have done in that manner. I don't care what the terms are. I don't care if you use my terms, as wonderful and as intriguing as they can be at times. To use any terms to analyze what happened to you 30 minutes ago. Of course, I guess I am pushing a little bit for some of you. Your life, the whole scenario of what's happened to you. There's got to be some meaning to it, right? At least there's got to be fodder for useful, groundbreaking analyzation. What else the hell you got? But if you're always in the position of apparently, through linear time, that you're having to analyze what happened to you, and you can't catch up, much less get ahead, what do you expect? What can you expect to ever come from this? You might become a philosopher. You may become a famous philosopher. You might write a book. You might write a famous book. But you will never get that which you itch for, that which you thought you were born to do. You will never get it, because you are limited to those two pools that are out there. There's that which is known and there's that which is not known. And I even fact, personally, I know the things that are not known by me. And so I've got to look over here and work on it. You're looking in the wrong place. You've got to look where it is unexperienced. You've got to look where it is irrelevant. That is the only place that will bring you up to date. It is the only place that will put you ahead of the game. Speaking, I'm trying to give you kind of an intermediate level here verbally, so it doesn't sound as though it's such a great incongruous, paradoxical shock. But if we were talking about sort of in a lateral sense, like a kind of preparation of you kind of being a recruit, a would-be revolutionist, then in a lateral sense, a kind of city-related sense, you would say the kind of consciousness you were striving for, the kind of view that you were striving for presently, would be one that would be like an unnatural wrap-up of everybody else in the city, all ordinary people, a kind of an unnatural wrap-up of everything that they had ever thought, felt, or experienced, including yourself, of course. But that is what it would be like. That is not an unfair verbal shortcut. Short note, short cake. And as some of you might recall, if you've seen a connection, the history of all would-be mysticism and strange activity is littered with people having these exceptional states wherein they seem to have been shot from some surprising temporary gun out of the city, at least into the outskirts of town, and they have these unusual moments and hours, and they continually try and describe them with this feeling that, my religion was right, their religion was right, all religions were right. I suddenly realized that there is a basic common denominator to us all. Or, when they're a little more poetic, there is no human activity that is foreign to me, the poet, the philosopher, the happy drunk. All of that is a kind of very crude reflection of the fact that to really be born to do this, to be properly attracted to this, whatever the last term was I used, you people know who you are. But to be attracted to this, there's a kind of potential that has to be there, and there is a certain kind of preparation involved, believe it or not, as unfocused as this may have seemed at times. But it is as though you have got to have your own feel and then your own realization that in a quite real sense, not poetic, not in a strange never-never land of mysticized particle physics or otherwise, but in a quite real sense, in your own nervous system, in your own genes, in your own DNA, you have thought everything that everybody that went before you has thought. You have felt everything they ever felt, and you have experienced everything that's been experienced up until this second. But binary consciousness, cyclopic sight, ordinary human consciousness cannot conceive of this, except at some kind of extreme moments. People have, I threw in accidental and would-be mystical things, drugs, as many of you have suspected and thought you've experienced in the past. The hallucinogenic drugs have made people have this fleeting experience that, geez, in me somewhere, I've done everything. I've been it all. It's all been me. And of course, then it's gone when the drug's gone. There is a reality to that. I can point out to you again that under ordinary conditions, what is lacking in that kind of awareness is an appreciation, in the widest poetic sense, of the existence of the great E-pool. You cannot feel in your own DNA, you cannot feel and experience the history of mankind with binary consciousness, which ends up being cyclopic sight. But yeah, there's two possibilities. There's I can either do it or not do it. And only one of them has any validity. Only one is important. That there are two great pools that feed everything. All of human progress is knowledge and ignorance. Yeah, I know there's those two, if you want to call it that. But then from what seems to be binary consciousness, then it goes to cyclopic sight, that there's only one of any importance. Who in the hell is going to worry about that which is not true? Or if we were speaking in a more spiritual tone, there is that which is proper and good and that which is improper and evil. That old story. Yeah, we got those two possibilities, but only one is of any pertinence. There's a way in which, let me see if I can take a quick sidestep with those of you still trying to tango. It is a fact that in the city, everybody plays by the rules. Now, binary consciousness, cum cyclopic sight, does not see that. It cannot see that. It would see that, all right, in the city, everybody does not play by the rules. They have laws to bring it down to a real good material horizontal level. In the city, in human life, there are laws, and there have always been a sizable percentage of the people do not abide by the laws. So to say that everybody in the city plays by the rules is false. And that's not true. Only cyclopic sight would say that. It would be like this then, if they could hear it. In the city, in any field, any area that would cross your mind, you could say that, all right, there are two sets of rules. That there seems to be the rules that say, all right, play by these rules. But then there's another set of rules that says, don't. And so everybody in the city, that's the full set of rules. So everybody in the city is playing by the rules. I don't guess I'll bother to ask if that helped. It should help. I have tried it would seem sufficient number of various positions of taking aim, enough unsuspected positions which to try and, not mortally wound you, but at least so that you could get shot. There is always in the city, always under the limitations of 3D consciousness, there's first, if pushed, there is a binary awareness that there are always two sort of possibilities. That yes, man can do good, man can operate like he should, or he can just be a no good. Man can either be intelligent, or he can be dumb. A man can be attempting to better himself, or just letting himself go to hell. A man can apparently, or obviously, a man can play by the rules, or be an outcast, be a criminal. But after that is stated, after that admission is extracted from an ordinary city dweller that, yeah, all right, there seems to be always two possibilities. it is truly, all you got to do is operates in you. It is the basis of keeping the ordinary yellow circuits operating. It is cyclopic sight takes over, and as far as it's concerned, all right, there are two possibilities if you insist. If you want to call on that, there are two possibilities. But one of the possibilities is not even deserving of existence. That the whole point of having the other possibility is to finally destroy this one. For good to destroy evil. For knowledge to finally absorb not knowledge, ignorance. For goodness to absolutely swallow non-goodness. For propriety to finally extend its corporate city limits to the point that all these unincorporated areas of disruption, dispropriety, get absorbed. What it amounts to, and there are no good words for this, is why I have to keep doing it. There are absolutely no words or no descriptions that will fit into binary consciousness that will verbally make anybody go, aha. But you should see that psychopic, ordinary operations of the yellow circuit do not even look at the binary world as offering two equal possibilities. It's though one of them is an aberration, that one of them is like a perversion of the other one. That we got these two pools, always, such as knowledge and not knowledge, or goodness and evil. But it is surely a temporary arrangement. It is an arrangement against which we must struggle. That there's only one worthy of my attention. And from that basis, life makes people believe in one lifetime, ordinary people. Makes the genes that make up one ordinary little person with a cutoff line of its genetic past, with the belief that I am special, that I am important, just the way you should. It then cannot see that not only are the two possibilities, as psychopic sight might begrudgingly admit theoretically, that not only these two possibilities are necessary, but even that won't explain anything. There is another pool. There is another pool from which no one ordinarily draws any fuel or substance. They're not even aware of it. And if you could really get ordinary consciousness down, as I've tried to explain once or twice, and you really made them think at best maybe you're playing some sort of mind games with them to make them say, all right, there's something other in any situation other than those two possibilities, because there's everything that doesn't fit in those possibilities. And that good old head with that huge big old eye might go, oh, all right, all right. Jesus, all right, all right. And I'm not just being funny. Your ordinary yellow circuits have gone through that. You've gone through that sitting here with me plenty of times. It almost gets to a point there's like something wants to break through, and it's like some little Zork in you. If there was this little creature in your head, it's like he goes, oh, all right, down. I'm getting dizzy. No, all right. And I got to stop this because what you're saying is almost beginning to make sense, and I know it shouldn't. And it's like, oh, all right, I'll agree. And then it's like you can stop it. Then I'll turn and do something, or I'll change the subject, or you can look off and wonder what does go on in a warehouse. The reason I liked the example for a few seconds I thought might help some of you, we're still back talking around about the same kind of situation in the routine city affairs of man, when I was saying that everybody plays by the rules. Everybody lives by the law. Binary consciousness, though, would say, all right, wait a minute, there's only two possibilities. We got laws, and there are people that live by them, and those who don't. So don't tell me that everybody lives by the law. But they do. But ordinary consciousness does not see for everything that seems to be there is also the absolute corollary that is or I'm not going to try to say backwards. And so there are two sets of laws. One of them are absolutely not seen. The one set of laws says, thou shalt abide by the law. The other set of laws say to another group of people, don't. And that's their law. They're not 10 commandments. You know that by now. We're 20. There were 10 more on the back. That is, unless any of you are going to show up here in the city with me and you're going to bring me a one-sided coin. It is not theory, it is not attacking religion, it's not trying to poke some kind of humanistic, intellectual holes in religion. It is a fact that ordinary consciousness cannot perceive that for any situation that seems to be divided up, which all affairs in the city are, into thou should do this instead of that. This is what we should be striving for to escape this. That we should be turning this of a lesser, kinds of foods of lesser gods into something of greater worth, that only one of these is worthy of man's great psychopic sight. That the rest of it is just something we're trying to put up with. It's something we're trying to overcome. It's something we're trying to transform into the good stuff. Everyone in the city lives by the law. But psychopic sight does not see. This is what it amounts to verbally. This is, of course, not the real state of affairs, but what it amounts to that there are two sets of laws always in operation. For every 10 commandments, there's 10 more they're not seen. For every 3 standards of morality, there are 3 others tied right to it. Everybody is moral in the city. But there's one set, standards of morality, that says thou shalt do all these things. But then there's another set for another group of people that says you won't. Don't. And they faithfully live by that. And you put them all together, and now we got to dance. You put them all together, and you have got that which absolutely supports life in the city. You can forget. I'm saying this, of course, figuratively and relatively, but you can forget about oxygen, sewer systems, fresh water supply. You've got to have the 2 sets of laws to keep the folks in the city alive. You've got to have the 10 commandments that everybody knows, and then you've got to have the 10 commandments that nobody recognizes. You've got to have the situation wherein I'm telling you that everybody plays by the rules in the city, and then you've got to have the majority of people, at least 50% plus 1, who say no, they don't. That's silly, if not outright dumb. Well, of course, I personally must take exception to that. We'll turn over the tape while I pull myself back together. Something else that related to me mentioning a kind of lateral expansion, a kind of intermediate ability that I could verbalize as being a wrap-up in one person of the understanding of everyone else, says feelings, thoughts, and experience. That there is a reality to it, and there'd be only a few people who would have any need, only a few people that life allows, makes, have such experiences. A very, very few, obviously, that has any sort of continuing awareness of this. But another way that I wanted to bring in something else, that you could look at this, would be that kind of non-binary, that kind of 3D time, which would make it 4D kind of consciousness, would be, from one view, you could look at as being a higher dimensional sight of life's already, which is really a better way of saying future, because it appears to be into another linear direction if you just say the future to ordinary people. But it is that from a higher dimension that is life's, quote, already. Not its future, it's just it's already. Also connected to that, if you recall, several times back I mentioned to you what is known to all of us in the warehouse and shipping trade is breaking down boxes. They've got to go out the back door into the garbage. It's taking these cartons, those that lend themselves to such as cardboard, that you take your little fist or your little hands and you break the box apart to where it'll lay down flat. In that same way, you have got to be a revolutionist, you have got to learn how to liberate this unused space in you. Because in a sense, that is what you're doing to these empty boxes. If you got empty boxes and they're going out the back door, that you got to pay somebody to come cart them off, or whatever it is, just for efficiency's sake. A box would be like this in volume. All you got to do is kick out the bottom of it, stick your fist through it, and it goes down flat, and you can take how many? If the box was this high to start with, once you break them down, you could get what? 20, 30 boxes like that. In a sense, you have liberated the space. You took it out of the box, which was useless, and you gave it back. Those that lend themselves to such as cardboard, that you take your little fist or your little hands and you break the box apart to where it'll lay down flat. In that same way, you have got to be a revolutionist. You have got to learn how to liberate this unused space in you. Because in a sense, that is what you're doing to these empty boxes. If you got empty boxes and they're going out the back door, that you got to pay somebody to come cart them off, or whatever it is, just for efficiency's sake. A box would be like this in volume. All you got to do is kick out the bottom of it, stick your fist through it, and it goes down flat, and you can take how many? If the box was this high to start with, once you break them down, you could get what? 20, 30 boxes like that. In a sense, you have liberated the space. You took it out of the box, which was useless, and you gave it back to big granddaddy space. You gave it back to bigger space. You gave it back to life itself that had all this space that you weren't using was in that box. You've taken out what you wanted, and now you liberated it. Ordinarily, you don't think about it, but now life's got it to use somewhere else. You have got to liberate the unused space in you. That is where what I'm presenting to you is the idea of a kind of lateral expansion of present city experience and knowledge, that you have got to be able to liberate all the areas in you that are unused. And there's several ways I can describe it, but again, in my continuing attempt to keep this simple, I will point out that unused space in you, among other things, is always this. Unused space is anything in you that can point a finger. Unused space in you is anything that is mechanical resistance. Unused space in you is any area wherein you have any of Zorik's relatives who, God knows how they got there, seem to have a little desk, and they have on a little green visor, and somewhere on their forehead is stamped the word critic. It is unused space. It is unused space if it believes I'm in charge of knowledge over here of some particular type. Or if it is in charge of ignorance. It is unused space. If it is that which is causing the contrast in you that makes anything capable of being thought of, which includes everything. If it is there to create enough contrast that you can think of it, It is unused, wasted space. And you got to break it down. You got to put your fist through it. You got to put your foot through it. You got to find a fat coworker back there and push him down on it. You got to do something. You got to liberate that space. You have got to use it, or else you're always full of, well, no, I'm not going to say that. You are full of what ordinary people in the city, I guess, would say you're full of information. You're full of facts. You're full of ignorance. You're full of disinformation. You're full of opinions. You're full of prejudice. You're full of well-founded prejudice. You're full of ill-founded prejudice. You're filled with objective bias and subjective bias. And, of course, you're filled with the ever-popular lithium and einsteinium and plutonium. It is unused space. It is as though you've got empty boxes and it will take up the room. It makes actual, useful work back in the warehouse almost impossible. You end up with what appears to be substantial somethings, that is, these great boxes, but they are empty. That there is as much unused space in these empty boxes that finally have almost taken up the warehouse. But you can get outside and look in, and wow, it seems like it is a warehouse full of something. You're not sure what. But floor to ceiling, wall to wall are these huge boxes. Little known to you, not known at all in the city, is the fact that most of the boxes are completely empty. You have got to liberate that space. That is what lateral expansion is. That is the basis of a continuing awareness that I am as dumb as everyone else is smart, and vice versa. I am as charitable as everyone else is ruthless, and vice versa. I, as you look in the mirror, say, I, oh dear, are it. As far as it can be known in the city, I'm it. If you had the proper kind of mirror, you could hug it and say, I'm all I got. But you would be able to hug it, you would be able to caress it, and at the very most, you would be able to accept it with, some people in the city would say, if they knew what I was talking about, they would say with an absolute lack of any passion, whereas the other group would say that is with a kind of frightening, unholy, unnatural passion. But either way is either way. You cannot properly perceive or begin to extract your own real fresh data with too much unliberated space. You just simply can't. Too much of what you hear from me, too much of you trying to make your own meaningful maps from your own experience, goes in one of the old boxes. You are going to think either the old or you're going to think the old based. You're going to think flying pigs, or maybe you might look at it as being a real breakthrough that one day you thought, no, it's pigs that fly. And of course then one day you might have a real low-level, Bayonne type mystical experience and make a tremendous breakthrough and say, no, I was wrong. It's cows that fly, flying cows. Of course, after that, there's probably no stopping you. On another hand, though, let me point out that real revolutionary data, that is, real useful data, cannot either be too local or too infinite or else it will preclude any possible map making derived from your own present experience. Now, believe it or not, what that sentence said, was that a sentence? What that said was that all of this, whether you were getting it from me or from some other source, would remain planning, thinking of action, plotting theory. Interesting ideas. It would not turn into action. It would not be something that would absolutely affect, strike absolute, anything that would affect your own nervous system, anything that would produce in your life change. The information cannot be too local, nor too infinite, nor too local. It can't be too old. It can't be too reasonable. It can't be too familiar. It can't be too true. Or else what? Well, we got all the good possibilities in the city. People hear it and go, I know all that. Or other groups say, boy, I want to go where they tell you the kind of stuff that makes me feel, oh, I knew all that. Thus you have the people who are the backbones of all churches, for instance. No surprises. Life has things arranged. There's just no real danger of a satisfied, cityfied Catholic in any city in the world being confronted with a priest suddenly come out, rips open his robes, flashes, picks up a bottle of gin, throws a hand grenade out in there. That is not the way things operate. It will be familiar. It will be, from a revolutionary viewpoint, it will all be too local. It will all be too personal, too predictable. But for the information to be truly useful in a revolutionary sense, it cannot be too local, but it cannot be too infinite. It cannot be too extreme. Or else you cannot take the information, that is, me talking. These are apparent ideas and pictures and maps. You will never be able to take it and begin to make your own experience. And I'm including now, not just what apparently has happened to you in life, but that which you begin to feel has happened to everyone in life. To be able to take that and your own maps begin to compose themselves. Oh, all right. It seems as though you can begin to compose your own maps. Related to your personal experience, not to theory, not to something you read, but it's that what happens to you, what has happened to you now begins to tell you something. It's non-verbal, because if you let it get verbal, you lose it. Well, but your experience begins to create knowledge in you that is new. And it did not come from ignorance. It came from you dragging, kicking, and screaming into consciousness, into the bush, the God Almighty irrelevant. To kick me in the ass and call me Fred unexperienced. That is the area between that which is too local and that which is too infinite. Is what? The irrelevant. It's right there. You can look at the too local and the too infinite as simply being additional right angle synonyms for the possible and the impossible, the true and the false. And as long as you are dealing with your own psychopic sight, there is no escape. There can be no movement. Because the only thing that you are focused on is one or the other. The only thing you're focused on is one, which is going to be what is accepted primarily in the city, is one at the expense of the other. So you're going nowhere. It is always, in the city, too local or too extreme. That is, that everything's either true or false. That things are either known, we know about this, or we don't. And I don't need to hear some cockamamie theory. I don't need to hear somebody that's rubbing crystals on their forehead and talking to dead Indians that tell me that they've been visiting the planets in Orion. I don't need that, because there are certain things that are known. I've studied my Bible, my Quran. I've studied my own sense of logic and reason. And I know what's possible. I know what could be true, and I know that which is obviously not true, that nobody knows anything about. All they're doing is referring to information, too local, information too infinite. But ordinary sight in the city tells you that one is at the expense of the other, that in one of these areas lies new information, the truth, the great secret. If it did, Jesus. We would all be in the bushes, and now the bushes would be the city on another level, and God knows where some of us would be. I don't even want to think about it. Something else from last time. Now that I put it to you this way, let me ask you, what form of data do you and the people, so that you can include two different groups, what form of data do you and the people seem to seek? Does it seem that you and the people maybe are seeking the kind of data that apparently offers knowledge, hope, relief, or fun? Now you've had 3 or 4 days since last time. You know, very close to this, I ask you, why is it topographically that there seems to be absolute numbers of possibilities in any field, and I can come up with them, that seems to cover everything, and yet you can't cut them down? You could say, well, wait a minute, hope and relief is about the same thing. But if you are really potential revolutionist, you know it's not. That in some miraculous way, sometimes I pick out 3 things, sometimes 4. Any of you that start getting real smart about it, I'll start making it 5. And when I pick them out, it's those 5, and you realize that explains it all. Everything I can think of fits into one of those 5, and yet you couldn't combine any of them. You couldn't make it 4. It's got to be the 5. Gee, isn't that weird? Yeah, it is. If you think that's weird, the real weirdness, if you knew how I did it, that's the real weirdness. But we sure are not going into that. But those 4 possible forms of new, useful, revolutionary data, it seems to either offer one of those 4 possibilities to all the people. And I ask you, which form of data do you seem to need? That which apparently offers knowledge, or that which apparently offers hope, or that which apparently offers relief, or that which seems to provide fun? Now you've had 3 or 4 days to think about it. Let me give you the punchline. At least down at 3D level. The punchline is that this is all 4 in 1. If it's not all 4 in 1, it's not this. I know I can sound logical, but don't take it seriously. Is it not? Now, if you separate them, you're back to the city. If I said in some way, well, what this offers is hope, and I left it at that, Jesus, anybody had any sense would throw rocks at me and realize that you hadn't gone into the bushes, you fell into some illusionary part of town wherein things are occurring that make LSD look like Lawrence Welk's routine cerebral processes. Or if I said, all this does is offer knowledge. But think about it. When it seems to be operating, when this piece of bushwhacking machinery seems to be operating at some optimal level, it does it all. But if you can't separate them, I even hate to say anymore, but it does them all, and they're so connected that you can't separate it. And if you do, if you say, well, what I got from that thing was one or the other, you didn't. It offers all four, but they cannot be separated. And if it does not give you all four, if it is not feeding all four of those potentials, then either something's wrong with me, something's wrong with the relationship between you and me and you being here, you weren't born to it, all kinds of possibilities. Or else, of course, the real obvious one that I hate to point out, but you could simply be a Sagittarius. I know it would break my heart to discover that about you, but... And don't any of you Sagittarius write me a card or any shit. Gemini, Aqualung, or whatever the rest of them are. Let me try and hit a handful of areas before the tape runs out. Most of the rest of what I was going to say is still tied into either the last time we met or the last few times. One is there should be less apparent in a revolutionist. There should be less apparent yellow circuit resistance to certain lab activities. It amounts to, still we're back to the area of a kind of extreme, unconditional self-protection if you understood what it was. If you understood that it is not limited to two pools of, I'm either going to look out for old number one, or else I'm going to be charitable. Or else I'm not going to just simply worry about myself. It's not either one of those. You know that. Either that or I have finally gone over the edge. The kid just said, how would you tell? I started to say, who writes his material, but I know. What is required is a kind of controlled, I'm going to say the word again, aggression. But aggression is really an outdated word from the past like everything else, including jokes, me talking to the elusive kid. Everything else, believe it or not, has some purpose. So even though I say it's not the word, I've used it several times, and here I am saying it again, controlled aggression, and then I say it's not the word. If I had some reason for saying it, I could have called it something else, and then said that wasn't it. But it's not. There is a reality behind the word aggression, and I even considered at times making up a new term, which is easy enough to do. But I'm going to bypass that, and right quick I'm going to see if I can step on somebody. There is a reality behind my use of the word aggression, controlled aggression, a kind of controlled chemical protection of oneself, one's revolutionary potential. And this reality behind my term, controlled aggression, is that it is really one aspect of certain functions of MV12. So let's skip that. I did point out several times back, if you recall, that the blood boils in battle, not in the victory, and that hormones are most active in the chase and not the capture. I pointed that out once, and by God, I've done it again. But what's the use in trying to do this the way that sounds sometimes, if whatever you do is just a day's news? And if you recall, sometimes past, I believe to everyone's satisfaction, mathematically, if not logically, prove to you all that all news is bad news. So what is the use in doing any of this, if I'm hearing you say it correctly, that as soon as it becomes news, as soon as you've made any progress, as soon as this fictional revolutionist that I keep conjuring up has gained some kind of new ground, if there is in fact some sort of progress, some kind of even temporary victories, that I have overcome bad habits, I have taken up some of the shortfalls in my abilities, I have overcome lethargy to some degree, whatever it is, if you've done it and it's now news, it's bad news. In the city and on any newly won ground, the revolutionist sees only a wasteland. It would seem to be different. Carrying my picturization far enough, and if you were using good old Harvard trained perhaps, or University of Georgia, or Los Angeles State College, or City College, using good old psychopic sight, it could seem that anything that can be accomplished, if you're using linear time to view this with one eye, is anything that can be accomplished should I say it? Anything that can be accomplished was a waste of time. If it is news, it's bad news. If it's a day old, it's already spoiled. Now all of this, for those of you taking real fast notes, of course I don't mean writing down notes, those of you who are taking note of all this quickly, that all such description can also be turned into a picture if you can go beyond your own limited experience. That is your own human experience in the city. And rather than just see it as paradoxical statements I could be making, you see it in the time element, that what you're only getting parts of dimensions, and that which apparently has just happened, it didn't just happen, it had already just happened. That what is new to you is part of life's already. Remember, I'm not saying life's already something. Life's, quote, already. I'm using already as now, it'd be something else in another dimension. I guess you might say it's another kind of dimension, another aspect that there is no word for. That which would seem new and fresh, that, hey, I just got this. I have just bought this item. Rushed it right home from the store, I'm going to put it right in the refrigerator or whatever is. Anyway, it's fresh. It's not. If you got it, it's already news. If you got it, it's already bad news. If you've got it, it's already spoiled. It's just the way it is. It's not discouraging. Oh, all right, it's real discouraging. But only to people in the city. Only to the people that have something better to do. Then it would be discouraging. Then if they in some way got tricked, dragged into a situation such as this and heard some of this and even tried to fool around with it, and then were forced to see what I just verbally described, oh, it's real discouraging. And any decent, sophisticated city person that finally saw that would do the only reasonable, sophisticated, city-bred thing. That is, they would wash their hands of it. I believe it's what they say in the city. They'd say, hey, later for this. I've got better things to do, and they do. If you got better things to do than this, then anything is something better to do than this, because it won't get you anywhere. Now, if you're dealing with city consciousness, you can't ever see that it gets you anywhere. And if you got outside the city, I'll admit this, it's all you can do to barely see that it barely got you anywhere. But then if we had time, we could discuss what is the actual measurement of barely. To those not moving at all, you could say that barely could be a lot. Or you could say if barely is all that's possible, then barely is a hell of a lot. But all that's, I'm sure, just general speculation that I don't know why I said it. I guess it was an attempt to ingratiate myself to the viewing public. All right, so it wasn't that. There is an absolute necessity for the protection of one's revolutionary potential. And it has something to do, I suggest to you, with the blood. It has something to do with battle as opposed to apparent victory. It has something to do with a chase as opposed to an apparent capture. And those that know, let me be a little more specific, a little more correct. None of you actually know. But those that begin to find any validity or else become very suspicious about me bringing up an absolute need to look after at all expense, as they would say in the city, at any expense, sparing no expense, which costs no one anything. You then might ask yourself that which I have also brought up in the last few meetings. How, or what might be the best possible way approach to defend myself? And I'll give you, let's see. Oh, all right, two possibilities. By thought or by feeling. Well, I don't know. I personally would prefer to live in a penthouse. And I personally would like to be on a waiting list. I don't want to start off. I don't want to in some way work my way up. You know, first live in the basement, then move up to the third floor, then to the fifth floor later. In fact, I personally would not like to even live in a building filled at all with common riffraff. That is, lower stories. If I was going to actually live in a penthouse, I would like to be in a penthouse that was all penthouses. I don't know how this would work. I'd like for all the penthouses to be at least a few feet below mine, but still, you know what I mean. The protection might come about through thought, apparently, or it might come about through feeling, apparently. And it might apparently fit into my description of controlled aggression. And it might have something to do with blood boiling during battle, not during victory, and hormones being active. Since I repeated that at least 3 times tonight, you might suspect that there is a tacit message there that active hormones in a 3D sense might be preferable to the alternative. But hormones are the most active during the chase, not after the capture. Also in the sense of something I just said and something that even Kyroots mentioned tonight, the revolutionists would see that not only all the territory in the city, but the very lands, the very neighborhood, the very street corners, the sidewalks, from whence he apparently sprang in this life, that not only are they unnourishing ghettos, that even the land that he has apparently newly won out here outside the city, or at least in the outskirts, that once he's won it, it's no better than what he left in the city, because it is all a wasteland. There is no nourishment left. You cannot go back to some land that you've just won, unless you're ordinary, and jump up and down, got your flag in the ground, and run around the flag and laugh, and remember the great battles we had yesterday, an hour ago, the blood that was freely running, the people you overcame, the people you got even with, the people you insulted. It's a wasteland. It's finished. You can't go back there. But in that sense, connected to that, I wanted to also point out that the revolutionist understands that from the city, even from the area that apparently is newly won ground through his own effort, from neither of those sources can he accept any of what seems to be true information arising. He cannot. And he further cannot accept any laurels from the city, from even areas that may appear to be newly conquered, when there's going to be some people left. And we're not talking about out there now, are we? But he can accept no laurels, no congratulations for his apparent exploits. Love. Point out something in it. Love in the bushes, which is really, as far as revolutionists are concerned, would be profitable, pleasurable relationships. Those kinds of pleasurable, profitable relationships that would be the revolutionist version of love in the bushes require something not necessary in the city, and that most of you have had some experience with, and I'll go ahead and stick a quick verbal tracing paper map over it for you so that you might be able to see it, and then what? Abandon it. Or at least get where? Over it. That kind of revolutionary love in the bushes, that kind of love in the bushes for the revolutionists, requires that there be a partner with a certain yellow circuit lab potential to share in a kind of certain shared laughter. Without it, you don't have revolutionary love in the bushes. Of course, on a warm day, a whole lot of you, if we were back now in the midst of a certain warm day, a lot of you would go, damn, I knew that. Sure you did. I pulled it right out of the well of what? Not knowing. No. I pulled it out of the pool of the extraneous. Another little something. They're back in the city. Back in life's minor leagues. But now all of you should recognize that things are drug out damn sufficient enough without you adding to it. This ordinary life itself is just drug out enough without you adding to it personally. Without you picking up new habits, picking up new forms of suffering, picking up new acquaintances who are full of forms of suffering. Not trying to put on somebody else's smelly old uniform. Not trying to switch shoes with somebody else. You know by now that even you new people should know that is this. There's no form of pessimism whatsoever or attacks on life. But from one view, when you're dealing with life as it is in the city, in the minor leagues, if that's where you are, if that's where you're going to stay, this is simply a fact. That whole thing is drug out enough without you personally adding to it. Jesus. If it never got any further than that, if I could get, if this was possible in the city, for you to ask yourself extraordinary questions that might lead to any form of attempted new experience, would be you to finally go, yeah, Jesus, just things running as they were before I ever heard of you or any of this. You're right, life is just drug out. I mean, it's enough as it is. What in the hell am I doing adding to it? In the least bit. In the least bit. What am I doing? Doing anything that does not please me. Anything that is not good for me. Anything that is not pleasurable. You got to not only be a minor leaguer to put up with that, you got to be, I hate to say it, I hate to even think about it, you got to be an exceptionally deranged, clumsy minor leaguer. I hate to think what your batting average might eventually be when they lay you out. I assume at least life will have the decency not to put it on your headstone. But we're not even talking about 290 and that kind of stuff. We're not talking about what the average catcher can bat. And I think I'll leave you with a one-liner. This has been floating around in my higher bushes about concluding, like throwing it out with a one-liner, or basing a whole new religion on it. I think I'll just leave it tonight at this. Head melodies can certainly be nice, but there are other tunes available. Right if you get work.